Welcome to my channel. Being home alone is supposed to be peaceful. It's a time to relax, unwind, and enjoy the silence, but sometimes that silence is broken. Tonight, I bring you 5 terrifying true stories from people who realized they weren't as alone as they thought. Grab a drink, lock your doors, and let's begin. I was 19 when this happened. I was staying at my grandfather's old house in rural Ohio. He was in the hospital, and I volunteered to watch the place. The house was isolated. The nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile away. It was a rainy Tuesday night. Around 11 p.m., I was in the kitchen making a sandwich. The kitchen sits right above the old basement. Suddenly, I heard a dull thud. It came from directly beneath my feet. I froze. I held my breath and listened. The house was old. It made noises. I tried to tell myself it was just the pipes. I finished my sandwich and went to the living room. An hour later, I heard it again. This time, it wasn't a thud. It sounded like scraping, like wood rubbing against concrete. My stomach turned. The basement had an old wooden storm door on the outside. It was secured with a rusty latch. I grabbed a heavy Maglite flashlight from the counter. I walked over to the basement door in the hallway. I opened it slowly. The air blowing up was freezing. I shone the light down the wooden stairs. Empty. I forced myself to walk down, step by step. The scraping sound had stopped. I reached the bottom and panned the light around. Dust, old boxes, cobwebs. Then, my light hit the small basement window near the ceiling. The glass was missing. It had been cleanly removed. I stepped closer. On the dirty concrete floor, directly under the window, were wet footprints, big footprints, leading into the dark corners of the basement. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I realized the scraping sound was someone pulling themselves through that tiny window, and they were down here with me, right now. I didn't look around. I turned and sprinted up the stairs. As I ran, I heard heavy footsteps suddenly rush out from behind a stack of old mattresses. They were chasing me. I slammed the basement door shut and threw the deadbolt. A split second later, something heavy slammed into the other side of the door. The wood groaned. I ran out of the front door, got into my car, and drove to the gas station down the road. I called the police from there. When the cops searched the house, they found the basement door still intact, but the intruder was gone. They had escaped back through the window. The terrifying part came the next day. The police found a backpack hidden behind the mattresses. Inside were zip ties, a roll of duct tape, and a large hunting knife. Whoever climbed into that basement did not come to steal a TV. This happened during my sophomore year of college. I was renting a small one-story house in a decent neighborhood. It was finals week, so I was up late studying. It was around 3 in the morning. My phone was on the desk next to me. Suddenly, it buzzed. It was a notification from my Ring doorbell camera. Motion detected at the front door. I pulled up the live feed. The video loaded. The porch was empty. It was just the wind moving the porch swing. I closed the app and focused back on my textbooks. 5 minutes later, it buzzed again. Motion detected. I checked the feed. Still nothing. But then, I noticed something strange. The camera didn't trigger because of the swing. The motion sensor was aimed lower, near the bottom of the door. I watched the live video closely. Suddenly, a pale, thin hand reached up from the bottom of the screen. It was sliding a long, thin piece of wire through the mail slot in my front door. Someone was lying flat on their stomach on my porch. They were trying to hook the indoor doorknob from the outside. I froze in absolute terror. I watched the wire wiggle around. It hit the doorknob. Click. The lock turned. I jumped out of my chair. I didn't think. I ran to the front door and threw my entire body weight against it. Just as I did, the doorknob turned and someone pushed from the outside. "Get out!" I screamed at the top of my lungs. "I have a gun!" I didn't have a gun, but it worked. The pressure stopped. I quickly threw the secondary deadbolt lock. I looked through the peephole. I saw a man in a dark hoodie standing on my porch. He wasn't running. He was just standing there, staring directly into the camera lens. He had a completely blank, emotionless expression. He stayed there for another 30 seconds. Then, He turned and casually walked away into the darkness. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They patrolled the area but found no one. They checked the footage. The man had no mask. His face was completely visible, but the police couldn't identify him. He wasn't a local. I moved out of that house 2 weeks later. I still get anxious every time my phone vibrates late at night. I am a 23-year-old woman. Last year, I moved into my first apartment. It was on the second floor of a secure complex. You needed a key fob just to get into the building. Because of this, I felt incredibly safe. Maybe too safe. It was a hot July night. I was watching Netflix in my bedroom. I kept my balcony sliding door open a few inches to let the cool air in. My balcony faced a small, dark alleyway behind the building. Around 1 in the morning, I heard a faint sound. It sounded like metal tapping against metal. I paused the show. The sound stopped. I figured it was just the apartment AC units outside. I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. To get to the kitchen, I had to walk past the living room and the balcony door. As I walked past, I stopped. The curtains were moving, but there was no wind anymore. I looked down at the track of the sliding door. It was wide open. I knew I had only left it open a crack. Then I looked at the floor. There were wet, muddy footprints on my hardwood floor. They started at the balcony and led straight into the hallway closet. The closet door was cracked open by an inch. My breathing stopped. My mind went blank. Someone climbed up the brick wall, opened my door, and was currently hiding inside my closet, just 10 feet away from me. I didn't make a sound. I slowly backed away toward the front door. I grabbed my keys from the counter. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped them. I unlocked the front door, stepped into the hallway, and slammed it behind me. I ran down the stairs to the lobby and called emergency services. The police arrived with K-9 units. They entered my apartment with weapons drawn. A few minutes later, they let a man out in handcuffs. He was a transient who had been lurking around the neighborhood. He was completely disheveled, and he was holding a roll of heavy twine. He had climbed the exterior drainage pipe to reach my second-floor balcony. If I had stayed in my bedroom, I wouldn't have seen the footprints. I would have gone to sleep with him inside my apartment. I never leave my windows open anymore, no matter how hot it gets. This happened when I was 16. I lived with my mom in an old suburban house built in the 1950s. My mom worked night shifts at the local hospital. I was used to being alone at night. My bedroom was at the end of the hall. Directly outside my bedroom door, in the ceiling, was the access hatch to the attic. It was just a square piece of painted wood. You needed a ladder to reach it. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke up. I didn't know why. The house was quiet, but I felt an intense sense of dread. Then I heard it. A soft, rhythmic thumping sound. It was coming from above my ceiling. Thump, thump, thump. Like someone was slowly crawling on their knees across the attic floorboards. I sat up in bed, staring at the ceiling. The sounds moved. They were moving toward the hallway, toward the hatch. I quietly got out of bed and crept to my door. I cracked it open and looked up. The white attic hatch was moving. It was being lifted up from the inside. A gap opened. In the darkness of the attic, I saw a pair of human eyes looking down into the hallway. Then, a long, dirty arm reached out. The hand gripped the edge of the ceiling, preparing to swing down. I panicked. I slammed my bedroom door shut and locked it. I pushed my heavy wooden desk in front of the door. Outside in the hallway, I heard a loud thud. Someone had jumped down from the ceiling. Then came the footsteps. They walked slowly up to my door. The doorknob jiggled. Then someone started throwing their weight against the door. The wood began to splinter. I screamed and dialed emergency services. I told the dispatcher someone was breaking into my room. I hid in my closet, covering my ears. The banging went on for what felt like hours. Then I heard the distant sound of sirens. The banging stopped. Heavy footsteps ran down the hallway toward the kitchen. When the police arrived, they found the kitchen window smashed. The intruder had escaped, but the investigation revealed something horrifying. This person hadn't broken in that night. They had entered the house days prior while we were out. They had been living in our attic for over a week. They found blankets, stolen food wrappers, and peepholes drilled into the ceiling directly above my mom's room and mine. He was watching us sleep for days. This occurred when I was 21. I lived in a duplex apartment in a busy city. My unit was on the ground floor. The front door opened directly onto the sidewalk. It was a Friday night. I was watching a movie on my couch around midnight. Suddenly, I heard a sound at my front door. It was the sound of metal scratching against metal. Someone was inserting a key into my lock. I stood up. I thought maybe it was my roommate, but my roommate was away on a trip. The key turned, but it stopped. It was the wrong key. The person jiggled the lock aggressively. Then they took the key out and tried again. I walked over to the door. "Who is it?" I asked loudly. The scratching stopped. Silence. I looked through the peephole. There was a man standing there. He looked normal. He was wearing a nice jacket and jeans. He looked confused. He was looking down at his keys. He noticed me looking. He looked up at the peephole. "Sorry," he said through the door. "I think I have the wrong apartment. I'm looking for Unit 2B. Unit 2B was upstairs. The layout of the duplex was confusing. It was a common mistake. "No problem," I said. "Go around the side. The stairs are there." "Thanks," he said. He smiled and walked out of view. I felt relieved. I went back to the couch. 10 minutes passed. Then I heard a soft click. It came from my kitchen. My kitchen had a small window that opened into the side alleyway. I ran to the kitchen. The window was open. The man in the nice jacket was halfway through the window. He had a silent, intense look on his face. The friendly persona from the front door was completely gone. He had a crowbar in his hand. He didn't make a mistake at the front door. He was testing to see if anyone was home. When I answered, he knew I was alone. I screamed and grabbed a heavy cast iron skillet from the stove. I swung it with all my strength. It hit his shoulder with a loud crack. He yelled in pain and fell backward out of the window, landing heavily in the alleyway. I slammed the window shut and locked it. I called emergency services immediately. They found him a few blocks away, limping. It turned out he was a serial burglar wanted in 3 different states. He used the wrong apartment excuse to scout houses. If no one answered, he broke in. If someone did answer, he found another way inside. Thank you for listening. Stories like these remind us that danger can be closer than we think. If you enjoyed these stories, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. Let me know in the comments which story was the most terrifying to you. Stay safe out there. Good night.